Hi guys! I feel like it's been a long time, a very long time since I last properly sat in front of the camera and talked to you guys. And that's what I'm gonna do today. So today's video is gonna be about my sexuality. It's gonna be about asexuality, and it's gonna be like a more personal, kind of in-depth video compared to the one I did previously, because the one I did previously got really positive feedback, which I want to thank you for that, guys. Here we go. There are a few things I want to address in this video that I didn't really address in the last video because it's such a wide, very complex topic that is very hard to cover it properly in one video, even in two videos. I would call myself more a grey asexual than an asexual. I put myself in this grey area because I don't feel like I'm 100% asexual. I don't feel like myself is steady enough or won't change or cannot evolve, you know. That's the first thing. Secondly, what I want to say that I haven't even talked about it in the last video, but I want to talk about my romantic orientation. I talked about my sexual orientation, but romantic and sexual orientations are two different things. Now, you know, with all that I know, looking at my old young self, it was pretty obvious that I would turn up to be asexual. Even when I was very little, my romantic way to perceive and imagine and feel love was already very unique, or at least not like most people. What I mean by that is that ever since I was very young, I grew, you know, like a kid obviously, but I grew affections, feelings of love or crushes, whatever you want to call that, with time, growing up. Some of them were deeper, some of them were more intense, serious. The thing that all those times where I was really attracted, romantically attracted by to someone, what they all have in common is that to me, being loved back had very little, if no importance at all whatsoever. I didn't feel the need to be loved back. I didn't feel the need to get a relationship. I didn't feel the need to confess my love either. I didn't feel the need to get anything in return, really. When I was in primary school, throughout all my years in primary school, as a little girl is in love, just like a little girl, you know, but I liked a little boy, and I didn't even confess my love, and I didn't feel the need to. You know, usually kids have lovers, you know, they write poems or they write letters and, you know, they say, oh, that's my lover or whatever, that's my girlfriend, or they play games together, that sort of things. I didn't do that. I just didn't feel the need to. I would write about it in my journal, I remember that, but that was basically just it, and I wasn't sad about it. I wasn't even thinking there was something wrong with that. But I remember that even at that time, my friends were like, I remember it not very clearly because I have very little memory of when I was younger for some other reasons. I remember that my friends would kind of persuade me into, you know, confessing that my feelings, you know, especially in the last years of primary school. It was like, hey, he's there, don't you want to go? And I was like, no, why would I? For me, it felt completely natural and normal, but I realize now that even at that time, even as little kids, I was already kind of different. When I got into middle school, it was even, I think it was probably the time where it felt the most obvious. My friends, they had boyfriends, didn't do anything with them, but you know, they had boyfriends, they would go to their birthday parties and they would kiss. Well, like, hey, you know, there is this guy who has a crush on you, and they kind of forced me to go out with him. You know, we would go to the beach together with my friends, they would try to make us really intimate and closer, and you know, for a time I didn't even realize really what they were doing, but when I realized it, I completely stopped talking to him, and I felt really disgusted at him, at myself, at my friends, and I was like, what are you doing, really? What are you trying to do? It made me feel really bad, but at that time I think I started really incorporating in me what everyone else was doing, what society wanted me to do. You know, I was reading lots of books, I was watching movies like everyone, and I would still always portray this view, this version of love that was like, you love someone, you gotta confess, you gotta be in a relationship, you gotta have sex with them. It was something that felt natural, that felt normal to everyone else, not to me, even when I was younger. But you know, because I wouldn't think of my feelings, I wouldn't think of my orientations or all that stuff because I was so young. So I didn't have the power or the ability to kind of stand for who I was and stand for what I felt inside. You cannot think what you don't really acknowledge to a certain point has no validity and no weight and strength in this world, really. Therefore, what I felt, because I couldn't really acknowledge it and realize it and be aware of that, I was not strong enough to fight, what everyone else was doing and what everyone else was telling me I should do, whether it was directly or not. When I got into high school, I got a boyfriend, and that was probably the worst and the most useless and meaningless experience I've ever had in my life. We didn't do anything together, we didn't share anything together, really. Everyone else was telling me, oh, you look so good together, he's so nice. He was friends with all my friends. My mom liked him a lot. My sister got on well with him. He was really nice, the kind of person who is really a smooth talker and always kind of really kind and, so persuasive. He almost kind of made me feel like someone else, or even like no one. Even though I was completely lost at that time, didn't realize what was going on and how bad it felt. There was one thing I always felt. I was always saying, you make me feel like I'm not myself. It's like it was taking everything away from me. Like all that I was being torn apart and just taken away from me. And I felt really, really bad. When I broke up with him, I felt so free. I felt relieved. I felt no sadness whatsoever, and I became immediately so cold towards him. I couldn't think of him. I couldn't think of this relationship without feeling awfully disgusted. Sometimes I had flashes in my mind that would come up, and I would see things that I didn't want to see, or remember things that I didn't want to remember, and that was, very, very hard for me. I had dreams, even nightmares rather. So that was a terrible experience, and I guess this all happened because I didn't listen to myself properly. And that's when I realized that I was asexual. It took me a long time, but because, after years and years, my friends were like, even now, they're like, but don't you miss being with someone? Don't you miss having sex? Don't you want to have sex, basically? And I'm like, no, not at all. I do not give a shit, really. I don't care. I couldn't care less. But my relationship towards sexually has evolved. When I was younger, I wanted to stay a virgin until my death. I don't know, it's a very weird kind of wish for a little girl. I felt like being a virgin was really beautiful. I felt like it was the most beautiful thing to be. My mind has changed on that, obviously. But then afterwards, I was like, sex is disgusting. Like really, it is disgusting. I was so disgusted by sex and sexuality. You cannot even imagine. Like I couldn't even think of seeing someone naked. I couldn't even think of touching someone. I was like, yeah, never. So there was a time when it kind of went back to normal, sort of. After I broke up with my boyfriend, I grew really, really disgusted. Much more disgusted than I was when I was younger. I couldn't even... That was awful. So yeah, so I just wanted to talk about that, like how did I realize that I was asexual? Well, through experiences, through mistakes, and through, years. It didn't happen overnight, even though I do feel and I do think that I've always been this way. As you can see, when you look at my history, my background, when I was younger, I felt this way already, both romantically and sexually. I was myself. Everyone's unique and everyone's different, but what I mean is that it's definitely being asexual and being not interested in... It's not that I am aromantic at all. I do feel love and I feel romantic love towards people, but I do not wish to be in a relationship with them, to be like really in a relationship and say that's my boyfriend, that's my girlfriend, that's my lover. No, there are people I love and there is a certain person I love, and I'm so happy that I have him in my life, and I would love to have him closer and more often in my life, but I do not have any desire to be in a relationship with him, and people are really confused about that. It's really hard for them to think that I can love someone without having any desire to be with that person, and it's even more confusing to them when I tell them that I have no sexual attraction to anyone either. And I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of hard to live because you cannot relate to people, you cannot relate to songs, to books, to movies, anything, which is not so difficult for me. I don't care that much, but because it's not mainstream, because no one knows about it, it's very hard to explain. And I think words are very important. What you cannot explain properly, what cannot be understood by others, stay in this very strange area where it is so easily the prey of assumption and misconception and prejudices and false ideas. And that's why I'm doing this video, because I wanted things to be a little bit clearer probably. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I would do another video about that. I hope you find it interesting. If you are in a similar situation or even not, feel absolutely free to share your experience and your story with me and with us. Let this be a place of love where everyone can express themselves and maybe find some help and support. And I will talk to you soon, guys. Bye.